You are listening to the What a Word podcast, an interview style podcast where guests bring their unique experiences and insight on culture, life's challenges, and faith. Each episode is seasoned with words which will inspire and encourage. Now, here is your host, Ryan Sharp.
Welcome to the What a Word podcast. It's a beautiful Wednesday morning. I'm happy to be alive. I'm happy to have another opportunity at life. I'm honored today to be joined by an impactful individual. We spent some moments with me practicing the pronunciation of her wonderful name. She's Dr. Manouchka Pierre. Intervention coordinator and coach, principal, chief academic officer, curriculum writer, published author. She has a number of different roles and titles. I'm happy to be joined by her today. My goal, as you know, is to share conversations on life, challenges, culture, and faith. And Dr. Pierre joins to share about her journey. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Pierre to the What a Word podcast.
Good morning.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to have you. And listeners and viewers should know that we are in different time zones. Celebrations are in order, but we'll touch more on that. Dr. Pierre joins me, and I wanted to talk to the self-described small girl from Haiti who now lives in the Cayman Islands. It's quite a journey. I wanted to learn about the cultural discovery you experienced coming to the United States.
I say coming to the United States definitely was a culture shock, would be the initial word used. Just because, aside from the language differences that I experienced, definitely a change in the way that we live, right? Something as simple as a coat and snow, seeing that for the first time. As a child of immigrants and an immigrant myself, I feel like I lived in two worlds for a really, really long time. There was the world that we kind of, had to navigate, especially at school, wanting to be an American and trying to assimilate as much as possible. But then there was the world of who I was at home in terms of being the eldest, being a daughter, the expectations that my parents had. I think the hardest part of navigating that was learning really early that I had a childhood, and my parents definitely kept me a child for a long period of time in some ways, but then in other ways, I stepped into an adult role really, really early because of the fact that my parents sent me to school to learn the language. And once I learned the language, they depended upon me for a lot of the things that they would have to navigate. I remember, I think the thing that stands out in my mind the most is preparing my parents for their citizenship test, preparing them for their life as permanent residents of the United States, having to help them remember, things like who's the president and things like that. But it's harder when they don't speak the language or they're not comfortable with the language or, some of the nuances in terms of things that they might be asked. So I'm very appreciative of the fact that my parents made that sacrifice, but I also know that there was definitely a sacrifice of my own that I didn't know that I would have to make trying to navigate the two worlds. It's funny when I talk to people who were either not from the United States or even from within my community of having to explain to them, like, I'm Black, but I'm West Indian. And that's a different Black than African American. Not better, not worse. It's just different. So there are a lot of things that are either acceptable or unacceptable within my culture that have nothing to do with my Blackness. Outside of the U.S., African Americans, unfortunately, in some of the West Indies and in Africa, have a bad rap, right? Because the media that sells us who we are, sells us, as drug dealers and women as loose and, all of these things. And if you don't know for yourself or have not lived that experience, you don't know that this is not the full representation of who African Americans are. So even that at home, trying to, tell my parents like, no, my Black friends. And I'm like, wait a minute, we're Black, but we're just different. So yeah, it's a lot of intersectionality is, I think, would be the word for my life, is living within those spaces and trying to navigate them and code switch in some of them at times, which can be overwhelming, but I'm grateful for all of the experiences because I feel like now I'm able to talk to different people and speak to them on their level because of my own experiences.
Were there any educators, anyone who took an interest in you, who perhaps saw what you may have been experiencing and offered assistance?
I wouldn't say anyone that like offered assistance. I think my teachers were very kind, but there is an educator that stands out. She's actually one of the biggest reasons I became an educator, Miss Wilkes, who was my, junior high, because we had, elementary, then junior high, then high school teacher. And I truly appreciate the fact that she made us rise to the occasion, right? So oftentimes when you're in certain spaces and you're not necessarily represented well, people look to you to be the representative of everything. But she really just expected excellence from us, no matter what our backgrounds were, where we were from. And it's been something that stayed with me as an educator as well, that all children have the capacity. We just have to meet them where they are and provide their need, which kind of, brings to the conversation of, equality versus equity. Oftentimes we give everybody the same thing, but what I need is not what you need to get to where we need to go. The journey might be the same, but the tools are going to need to be different for us to both get to that point. So she just gave us what we needed. She, expected the best, but it was just a lot of love. And a lot of times people don't realize that as educators, that we pour into our kids personally. We are personally vested. And that was the first time that I felt somebody was truly personally vested in me doing well and me being okay at the same time.
Wow. Yeah. Have you seen that in students that you taught later on? Did you see a young Manouchka over and over again in terms of?
Yeah. I especially saw it in immigrant children. I actually have an experience that stands out to me. And this is when I first started as an educator. We had a young man at the high school that I was doing like my practicum. I wasn't even like teaching as of yet, just really starting to get into the classroom and doing some internships, who had come from Haiti. And of course, it's home. So I take a vested interest. And his math and sciences were off the charts, just well advanced, doing like collegiate mathematics when we think about, where we are curriculum wise in the States. But he didn't speak the language, and he could not graduate because he couldn't pass the FCAT, because Florida had made passing this reading test as one of, so like and New York has it too, where they have like the Regents diploma and like a regular diploma. But the regular diploma just says that you showed up. It doesn't mean that you did well. The Regents diploma in New York, or the FCAT diploma, well, FSA now in Florida, says that like not only did you show up, but you learned well enough that you can pass these exams. And as an educator, we don't want to get into how I feel about exams. But he just couldn't pass the reading test. But the reason he couldn't pass the reading test is because English isn't his first language. And trying to learn a new language, I was lucky. I came really, really young. So I speak English like a native speaker because all of my education has been here. But imagine having learned everything in like French and Creole, and then coming here and only wanting to be able to just get to a college education. And the thing that's stopping you is your inability to truly navigate the language. But, we tutored him, we found him support, we found him help. And he was, finally able to meet that benchmark, and the pride that I could see in his face and the pride that, his family felt, I definitely felt. But it's a heavy load to give a child, to say, not only do you have to learn this new language, but you also have to learn this new culture, and you have to adjust, and you have to do it quickly, because he came in like his junior year. Well, they put him in his junior year. He actually was old enough to graduate, but it's just, experiences like that of seeing children struggle with things that are no fault of their own.
Yeah. And I imagine a lot of geniuses and high potential students were displaced because of, as you described, the cultural language barriers issues.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Your career, it doesn't seem like a straight line. It seems
No.
like I don't know what the diagram would look like in terms of your path, but the bio describes a bilingual paraprofessional and parent volunteer. That led to the awakening in terms of your desire to be an educator?
It's funny. I, for the longest time, wanted to be an attorney. Had it in mind of how my life was going to go, right? But you know what they say about better laid plans. If you want to make God laugh, tell him the plans that you made without speaking to him first. So that was my life. I became a mom really, really young. And my youngest daughter, actually both my girls are gifted, but my youngest definitely showed giftedness like really early on, was reading at like the age of 3, just really early on. You could see that she was just learned different. And I was getting called to the school, and I just didn't understand why. I'm definitely one of those parents, because, I'm a little nerdy myself, who did a lot of work with my kid at home. So I knew that she could navigate school in terms of the academics really easily, but did not realize that there were other things that I would have to navigate for her. So I became a parent volunteer really to just advocate for my own child, because a lot of the times students that are gifted often also have another exceptionality. Her other exceptionality happened to be that she was ADHD. So she's smart and she's bored. She's going to be a problem. She's going to be a problem. So, and what that looks like for a lot of Black babies, Black and brown and, children of color, is that you then get labeled as a discipline problem. And it's not that you're a discipline problem. It really is that I either learn faster or learn different than everybody else in this room. And I need to be provided with the things that I need. So, the teacher that she had was great, but she really was, I learned this from the book, and the book tells me I need to do this. And before that, I think her job had been like a princess at Disney. So, so she just didn't speak the language of a lot of the students in her room, right? She didn't understand them in the way that she needed to, and just felt that like, oh, if the child is not responding to me, then clearly there's something wrong with them, and I need to send them to the office. But this is, first grade. I cannot allow my child to start their academic career in this way. So that's how my advocacy as a parent started. And then I fell in love with it. I fell in love with helping in the classroom. One of my duties as a parent helper was to read aloud to the kids. And I'm one of those readers that like makes the voices and, does the actions. And so I fell in love with the interaction with kids. And from there really decided, okay, like, what do I need to do? And so I started off as a paraprofessional as I started going back to school myself. And as a para, you work alongside kids really closely. And being an immigrant who hadn't, spoken English when I came in, I was like, I'm here for the bilingual kids. So yeah, Spanish became a lot more comfortable for me, trying to talk to the kids and trying to talk to their parents. And from there, once I finished, my education at UCF, I did my permanent substitute in a school in Orlando that was high needs. So we would call it Title I school. So impoverished area has a lot of, needs, not just academic needs, but like social and social emotional needs. And they needed a teacher who was bilingual. And I was like, well, I can, I can do it. I might have to muddle my way through a little bit. So I really started my education pretty much advocating for kids like me that I needed, right? I became the advocate that I had needed as a kid. So it was definitely an experience starting that way, because I think it created a mindset for me that I'm on the kids' side always. Whatever's best for my students. And even as a leader, I still find myself advocating for kids that need different things, whether it be, ESC, which falls under exceptionalities from like gifted to developmentally challenged, whether it be mental health, whether it be social emotional things. I feel like I speak for the kids that often get overlooked, that fall through the gap, that still need someone to look out for them. So, advocating for my baby made me an advocate for everybody's baby. Yeah.
What did you see on the ground? Was there anything that blew your mind where you must have said in moments, parents, you better get in this school because they're crazy here?
Wow. It's funny that's the thing that I saw was specifically how Black and brown babies are being treated, and the lack of knowledge that parents had. But in all honesty, during that fight, it became like, because that's what my doctorate is on. So my doctorate is specifically, my dissertation was about discipline in the state of Florida, because the state of Florida was where I was living at the time. African-American boys are 2.3 times higher likely to be suspended or expelled from school, right? And now we have African-American girls who are being funneled through that pipeline as well. And actually during the pandemic, a few of my cohort mates and I actually did a panel discussion for parents to help them understand their rights as parents, especially during a pandemic. Like, what can you ask for? What should you expect? Does your child have an IEP? Are there differences? I know that one of the things within our community is that there's stigma attached to asking for help, which causes kids to struggle and often creates potential mental health issues that probably weren't there beforehand. So what I was seeing on the ground really was a lack of knowledge from parents, like not just them not doing, but them not knowing to do. And that is the thing that we have to always pay attention to, that we have this belief that, oh, you become a parent and automatically you know these things. Even as an educator, I had difficulty. After becoming an educator, my daughter was in high school. I had difficulty navigating the system until I told them, hey, by the way, I'm an educator. Then it was like, oh, okay, well, we'll tell you what you need to know to make those things happen. Where most often than not, you'll find that parents just don't know. They don't know, college deadlines, especially if you don't come from a line of that, right? And that kind of comes to like some of the generational things that we talk about. And it's not necessarily a race thing, but let's just be honest. Oftentimes within white families, you'll see that kids, their parent went to a certain college, their grandparent went to that college, right? And so there's like a lineage of doing this thing. Whereas I am the first to go to college. I was the first in my family, in my immediate family, to get a doctorate. And then my cousin got a doctorate. So now there's two of us. And, we're opening businesses. Those aren't things that we saw. Those are things that we saw other people do. And we saw, okay, maybe we can do it. But it wasn't happening within our community. There were, at most, you could do certain things like, oh, if you do go to college, you could become a nurse or maybe an engineer. Back in Haiti, those are things that were like very clear and evident that could happen. But here, it's like, well, what do I need? I actually didn't know that I was not legal in the United States until I tried to go to college. I had to fill out applications and they asked for a social security number. And I was like, Mama, do I have a social security number? What's my social security number? They're like, yeah, no, you don't have one. And the reason you don't have one is because, you know, we had to go through the amnesty for us to become legal. And now you have to do this and you have to do that. And I'm like, I just want to go to school. I just want to, you know, go to college, or even navigating financial aid, not knowing that my parents' income would not be of benefit to me. It actually was detrimental for me to put that on my paperwork because I had a summer job. I could have just applied by myself and gotten Pell Grants and all of those things. So it really is just a lack of knowledge and providing spaces for parents to get the information that they need to truly advocate for their kids, whether it be what's happening in the classroom, whether it be them navigating their journey out of school, you know, whether it be outside resources that you can request, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy. All of those things are things that, unless you're either taught it or you know, learn it kind of by happenstance, most people don't know about. So yeah, that's the biggest thing I think I've seen on the ground is so much information is either not given or potentially denied to parents. And there's this antagonistic relationship that a lot of parents have with school, either because of their own experiences or because of the way that the school has treated them. I always say, both as an educator, but also as a parent, you can tell the climate and the culture of a school from the way that you're greeted in the front, right? So when you walk into a building, if it's welcoming and they're good morning and they're asking how they can help you, more than likely you're going to be able to get what you need there. But if you are just another number and people seem to be annoyed by you being there, then that's a place where you are going to have to fight for your kid and you need to pay attention.
Powerful, because that goes against the backdrop culturally also of the practice anyway has been when we turn our kids over to a teacher, the teacher knows what's best and they'll do the right thing by my student. But by and large, it's not uncommon for Caribbean parents to show up to parent-teachers meeting and not offer any objections. And because culturally, that's where we were, you know, teachers did what's best. We could trust them with our students.
The teacher, I mean, we can hope that the teacher has the best interest at heart for our babies, but you're your child's first educator. You know what's best for them. And when you come in with that mindset, then you pay a lot closer attention. I mean, I'll be honest, especially being a translator at my parents' parent-teacher conferences, I wasn't telling them everything that was happening or everything that was being told by the teacher. So can you imagine, you know, not knowing that you have to advocate for your kid because you don't speak the language, not knowing that your kid is potentially failing because you don't speak the language, right? I mean, I'm grateful that, you know, my parents, the trust that they put in me was well placed. I did well in school for the most part, but imagine having a kid that's struggling and you don't know to ask. And when you do ask, your child doesn't communicate it well because they're afraid they'll get it. I mean, there's so many pieces there that could potentially be to your child's downfall. So yeah.
You have a bachelor's and a PhD in education from the University of Central Florida.
Yes, I'm a Knight. Go Knights.
Yeah.
Charge on, yeah.
Two master's degrees, one in social science education, your first love, and master's in public administration and policy. Tell us about that journey. I mean,
school.
Again, I'm trying to see what the diagram looks like. But...
I like school. So as I highlighted before, I was a young mom. I actually got pregnant my senior year of high school. And I didn't finish my education formally. And initially, really, and it's a strange thing because education is so important in my life now, but really didn't think that like that would have been my way out. Just didn't know like how do I, so, worked menial jobs, all of these things. And advocating for my daughter really made me start thinking about policy. Of course, social studies is my first love because I really do have a love for the world and cultures and languages and how we are actually quite similar, no matter all the differences that show up. So initially, I actually got my AA and then got my bachelor's. So I got my AA from Valencia Community College, and Valencia was just starting a program where you could go directly to UCF. You didn't have to do like any of the paperwork because the two schools were, creating this merging in some way. And so like I got my bachelor's in political science because political science still potentially gave me the possibility to become an attorney. But while there, I took social science education as a minor and was like, you know what, let me stop fighting it. Because, we fight, God will, I don't know, anybody's faith that's listening, but like God will put something on your heart and you'll be like, yeah, but this idea I have is a really good idea and it'll still make a change. And it was like, yeah, no, that's not what I want you to do. This is what I want you to do. So I got my bachelor's and really started thinking about like, what are the things that I want to do later on? And I knew I wanted to be in some capacity, be a leader. So I got my master's in social science education, but still like that love of like policy and politics still was there for me, which is why I got my MPA, my master's in public administration. I know that I'm hoping, and I don't say I don't, I know, I'm hoping that it'll come full circle for me. And the advocacy that I've been doing as a school educator and school leader eventually will move into a larger space. So having that knowledge base, was really important to me. And my doctorate, I don't know, it was something that I didn't see anybody else doing, but I knew that I had the capacity to do. And when I started the program, I thought of it in one way, but by the end of the program, I definitely felt it in a different way. My initial dissertation topic was focused on giftedness because, as I told you, I have a daughter who's gifted, but in the immigrant population. And a cohort mate of mine, we were talking and we were kind of, feeding each other ideas back and forth. And she ended up doing that topic and I ended up changing my topic. To be honest with you, I fought really hard for my doctorate. Initially, I had a whole committee and lost that whole committee because the person that was originally supposed to be my chair didn't want my topic as what it was, right? Because when you go into writing your dissertation, you kind of field topics to your chair. You pick your chair and you field topics. And more often than not, they go with what you're recommending or what you're talking about, with some tweaks to be like, hey, narrow this, narrow that. And my initial chair, and I'm not going to state the person's name because they're still a professor, said to me, your topic is overdone. We know that Black and brown children are suspended at a higher rate. Okay, it's overdone. And in the midst of, and I'm grateful because I'm a believer of what is for you will be for you. So I lost my whole committee and I'm grateful that I learned advocacy early because I advocated my butt off for myself, was ready to go up to the dean of the college if I had to. But a new professor came in and he was his area of expertise was exactly what I needed. He had worked with the Southern Poverty Law Center, had worked in rural communities, which often emulate urban communities, just a different demographic. And so he was like, nah, we can do this. We're going to narrow the scope. And my dissertation is actually a replica of research that was done in the DMV area, in the DC area. And as I was starting to go through, I realized that while it is very clear to everyone in America and possibly the world that Black and brown children experience exclusionary discipline, expulsions, suspensions, that kind of thing at a higher rate, there literally is no language in the education policies written for the state, specifically the state of Florida, that speak to that. How do you know that there's a problem and you have no remedy for it? Which means you don't think it's a problem. You think that this is okay. And that is really what lit a fire under me to really finish my dissertation, because there was definitely a time where I was ready to just kind of be done with it. Navigating imposter syndrome, not feeling that I, belong there, that, there are so very few of us. I mean, I think they said something in the number of 10% of people get a doctorate, right? I have an EdD. And within that 10%, maybe 1 to 3%, something like that, are people of color. And I'm not talking about medical doctors. I'm talking about PhDs and EdDs and things like that. So, but it was just so important to me to make sure that I gave a voice to students that were, I wouldn't say being mistreated, but being misrepresented and being disciplined as a result of that misrepresentation. So, that was the process for me, but I'm a nerd. I really am. I love learning. And I think that schools have kind of gotten away from that because we have so many other things on our plate. So it was just important to me to learn as much as I could about what it is that I was going to do, but also kind of learn for myself what I wanted to focus on, right? Because you can get into an industry or you can get into a mindset of you want to do it all, right? I want to advocate for kids. I want to fix the system. I'm very much a, power to the people type of person. But I had to find the thing that became my why. And so hopefully eventually it'll be some sort of policy changes in the way that education and the way that it interacts with students of color, minorities, women, just the way others, right? The groups that are othered experience education as opposed to the majority, because they're just as important. So yeah, that was my that was my experience through education, just trying to get back to where I initially started, where my parents kind of dreamed for me, right? The dream that they had for me was I would come here, I'd get my education, and I would, prosper. And I kind of veered off track, but education brought me back. So it's been both my saving grace and my why and my call to purpose. So if I keep learning, maybe I can help others.
Here, that's powerful, man. And I gotta tell you that there is some listener or viewer that hasn't moved on because you indicated that you had a child your senior year of high school.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking now about postgraduate degrees and a doctorate. Someone needs to know that it is possible to finish, even though there are things that happen in life that for moments may throw you off that course. Could you say something to that person who is listening and they're finding it hard to believe that someone bounced back from early pregnancy to now being so accomplished?
Yeah. I would say that as long as there is breath in your body, there is possibility. That the timeline for your life is your own. And I think what creates a lot of anxiety for a lot of us is trying to live a timeline that doesn't belong to us, right? I should be married by this time. I should have a house by this time. I should have, this degree by this time. It really was for me, taking it step by step. And even if, you have small successes, those small successes eventually lead to where it is that you're going to be. That life is truly a journey. It is not a sprint. It is a marathon, and you have to pace yourself, and you can't decide that you're going to try to do everything at once, or that you've lost because you made a misstep, right? And if you're running and you fall, your legs are still working. Get up. Your legs are still working. I mean, for me, it was more than just having a child, at the age of 18. I actually had 2 kids by the time I was 20, but there was literally a time where I was homeless, right? So yeah. So there was a time where my, excuse me, I'm getting emotional, but my biggest want was to be able to do for my kids. And now I'm they're proud of me. So that possibility exists that you can overcome circumstances. Circumstances are just a stop or a bump on the road. A speed bump slows us down, but it does not stop us. Only we can stop ourselves. Yeah.
Someone needed to hear that, man. I appreciate your transparency as well. I really do. I really do. Where in the timeline did you then tell your folks, Bahrain is where I need to go next?
You know what? I feel like I am the manifestation of just being led, honestly, because I won't lie, I really just be thinking I have it figured out. I'm like, I know what I'm gonna do. After working in Daytona, so I actually worked in a school in Daytona for about almost 4 years, about 3 years. That was a second chance school. I had students that I had to, make sure their ankle monitor was plugged in. But I'm gonna make sure you get an education though. I don't care what you got going on at court, but I'm gonna make sure you get an education, because for me that is gonna be your way out. I had a student, during that time that was in jail when we found out that he was due to graduate. But before then, didn't even have the potential to graduate. But because he was 17, I was like, you made this mistake. You're going to be here for a couple of months, but when you get out, we're not going to do this again, because now you have a high school diploma. So I was in that school for quite some time, and got an offer in Orlando to be a civics specialist. Civics is specifically like government, in a school in Orlando. And I was commuting 90 minutes every day, back and forth. In the midst of, that constant commute, one morning on my way to work, I got into a car accident. And I don't know if people understand how muscle memory works. I had an experience where one morning I arrived to work and didn't remember how I got there. Literally, it was muscle memory that got me there. So I was not surprised that I had the car accident, because I was just tired all the time. And during the time of the car accident, once again, being West Indian, my parents were like, you don't quit a job unless you have another one lined up. And, being very intentional about how I make decisions, I quit mid-year. That was so unlike me, but I just really felt strongly in my spirit that although I really wanted to work in this space and make this money, because there was an extra bonus, I'm not even going to lie about that, that this wasn't for me. So I quit my job and came home to New York because I was living in Florida, came home to New York. At that time, I had just really kind of started doing like my freelancing on the side in terms of consulting and curriculum and things like that. And was like, well, I'm going to try and start my business. Like, I'm not going to go back to work. But I've always wanted to be, go international. And I applied for a couple of jobs, and I specifically applied for this job in Bahrain. I got interviewed, I think I got interviewed like on a Sunday. And by the following Wednesday, I was in the Middle East. And when I tell you, like, when I made the decision, I really did not think this through. I'm not even gonna lie, I really did not think this through. Like, they interviewed me and, they told me the position was history. And I was like, yes, I get to be back in the classroom. Because I'd gotten out of the classroom. But, I was working on my doctorate and I was like, I get to be back in the classroom and I get to teach kids again. Because there's something about being in the classroom that provides a closeness to kids that being a leader does not. I know my kids as a leader, but as a teacher, I know them more intimately because I know like the deficiencies. I see it on tests. I see, where they're struggling. You don't necessarily see that unless a teacher tells you as a leader. So I was really gun-ho about being in the classroom. So I got interviewed and they were like, when can you start? And I was like, well, I'm not working at the moment. I can start whenever. They're like, okay, well, if you send us your passport and send this and I was like, wait, huh, what happened? And sure enough, by the following week, I was in Bahrain and I didn't have time to be scared. I think that's what it was, because had I given myself time, I probably would have talked myself out of it. My parents, I love them, but they didn't really understand. My dad had just been watching videos on the Arab Spring. So they really thought, media, once again, it's all about what you're sold. So they really thought that like I was going to be going to this country and I was going to be subjugated because I'm a woman and, all of this oppression and, this religion and like all of this stuff. And I got there and I was like, this isn't what I was sold. This isn't who it is. Like, these are not the people, like this can't be. And it's so funny now because now I have conversations with them and they're like, tell us more, because what they've been told is not the whole truth. There are pieces of the truth, right? Even with like, in stereotypes, they come from some sort of truth, but it's not the full truth. And no group of people is monolithic. No group of people. And I learned those nuances while living in the Middle East, but it just opened my eyes to the potential that I had and that education wasn't this simple thing. And realizing that it now gave me an opportunity to see education in other countries. There was definitely a time, and I still think about it, where I considered opening my own school. So this now gives me opportunities to see different sorts of programs, right? Because before I was familiar with AP and advanced and honors courses, IB was this new thing for me, right? The IB curriculum, this worldly curriculum that everybody else in the world seems to know about, that I knew very little about. So it really opened my eyes. I really fell in love with the culture. I've learned some Arabic. I mean, not a lot, so I'm not gonna mess it up. But like, I learned some Arabic. But I fell in love with my kids, and kids are kids no matter where you go. They experience similar issues no matter where you are, trying to live up to your parents' expectations and trying to navigate education, bullying. All of those things are things that are experienced no matter where you are. And yeah, I was there from 2018, led through the pandemic. So imagine being a principal in the Middle East, within a new culture, and navigating all of those things during the pandemic. And then, I came back to the States and, lived in New York for the last year, where I've been an intervention coordinator. And I love the school in the Bronx, but it was time for me to go back abroad. It was time for me to go back abroad. And initially, initially I really wanted to be in Africa, because one of the things that living in Bahrain provided me with was the ability to travel to Europe and Africa a lot easier. So I went to Kenya while living there, and just absolutely loved it and fell in love. Can you imagine stepping onto the soil of a country that you've never been in and feeling like it was home? And something about being in Africa, I don't know if you've ever seen like I think it's like a TikTok where it's like, this man walked up to me and asked me if I was from Africa. And I said, I was supposed to have been, I should have been. That's how I felt. I was like, oh, I'm home. This is home. Yes, I'm Haitian. I am a proud Haitian, 1804, but like, that's not where we're originally from. Like, this is home. And it felt like this is where I belonged. So I really was trying to find a job in Africa. I wanted to be in Kenya or, in Rwanda, which has done amazing work in terms of the way that they've recovered from the genocide. But I applied for this position here in the Caymans. And when I had the conversation with the director of the school, I was like, wow, the West Indies. I visited as a tourist, but never considered living back in the Caribbean. And I'm grateful that, I was led to pick this. The interview just felt like a conversation. The school feels like a community, and the changes that they're trying to implement and the spaces they're trying to create for children just really spoke to me. So I was like, well, maybe another home. Maybe another home. So before I left, my dad was like, what is it with you? What do you have against your second country? What do I have against the United States? And I was like, I have nothing against the United States, but there is a whole world out there. And I get to be a part of it. And I get to do what I love in that world, no matter where I am. I'll take it. I'll take it. So yeah. Interviewed on Sunday and landed and started teaching on like the next Sunday, because the work week there is from Sunday to Thursday. Friday and Saturday is the weekend there. But yeah, didn't have time to be scared. And since then, I've just been like, let's do this. Bring them to me. What country are we going to next? So my contract here is for 2 years. I'll see how much I love it if I want to extend. But the world it's amazing. And the people in it, when you interact with them on a personal level, can teach you so much. I've had to unlearn so many negative and I would actually even say bigoted thoughts that were taught to me. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that I can meet people where they are and they can teach me who they are without having this preconceived notion of who they're going to be and how they're going to treat me. And that's an amazing feeling.
Sobering too, because you and I spoke offline about some of our favorite authors, James Baldwin, for example, Maya Angelou, these individuals who went abroad and found a sense of peace that you've amplified and put into words, that, there's an answer there. And we perhaps in this conversation created some potential disruptions in some families, because
I hope so.
it is now looking like the answer may be abroad.
Yeah, I really hope so. There's a level of safety that I feel being abroad that sadly I don't feel in the United States. And not just physical safety, but also like social emotional. When we were off camera, we were talking about like watching the news, it just always feels like when we're in the news, it's something negative, or if we're in the news for something positive, it's the first of something. I'm like, we're in 2022 and we're still experiencing first. And especially for, you know, ADOS, American descendants of slaves, right? Like, it's like, they should not still be experiencing first, but they are. And so that experience of, and yeah, at times when I'm abroad, I get asked questions that are just kind of like, oh, is it really like that in the United States for Black people? And just kind of having to like unwrap that of like, yes, there's the African-American experience, but I'm also West Indian, so that's different, you know, trying to help people understand that. But there really is this level of safety. Like I have, you know, friends that have, that are now expats in like Mexico. And I have, you know, friends that are not of African descent. So like I have a girlfriend that is from Colombia that is now in Qatar as an educator. And I also know, you know, quite a few traveling nurses. And I can tell you that aside from the safety that you feel, there's also opportunities for advancement that we don't even consider. You know, that you can go work someplace, and I'm just going to put it out there, and work and get your money tax free. And the ability to save and provide generational wealth that may not exist in the United States, that you're not living paycheck to paycheck. And as an educator, my professional acumen, my expertise is appreciated. Like there is the feeling that like, hey, she went to college and she got this degree and she might know what she's talking about. Whereas in the United States, I truly feel that as an educator, I am constantly having to explain why this is what's best for kids. And having, whether it be politicians or even parents tell me, I don't know what I'm talking about, and this is what they want done. And then later on blame me because you didn't do what I told you to do. What was the point of me getting the expertise if you're not going to listen to me? I definitely feel like an expert outside of the US. I definitely feel like my knowledge base is appreciated and understood, and I'm seen as someone who knows what they're talking about outside of the US. So there are quite a few benefits, and I'm not saying it's for everybody because it isn't, because you do still feel homesick and you have to navigate that, and you do have to move every so often, and you have to understand, and you know, the mental health issue that kind of, you know, deals with that. But you know what it's also taught me? It's taught me minimalism. I have brought 3 suitcases worth of things for the next 2 years. When I lived in the US and I had a whole apartment worth of stuff. So now I'm like, okay, what do I need? What do I need? And those are the things I bring with me. So I need my shoes because I'm, you know, a stereotypical woman, but I need my books, and that's it. Right. So it's helped me kind of narrow my focus in terms of like what's important to me. So there's so many benefits to me being abroad that I truly recommend it for people who are feeling that drain that you often feel in the United States, that overwhelming feeling of the rat race. That's the other thing. It took me out of that rat race. Like, yes, I still have a job to do, but the job feels very different. I'm not trying to constantly make more, do more, be here, be there. Like, I don't have to do that constantly. And being a New Yorker, and for anyone who's listening that's a New Yorker, they'll tell you, there's a certain aggressiveness that the rat race expects from you that I feel shortens your life, honestly. I remember coming back from Bahrain and I, you know, being in New York, and I was driving, and my car has auto lights, but I think I had like turned them off or whatever, and my lights weren't on. This gentleman was behind me. He wasn't even in front of me to, you know, to experience my lights not being on, creating a problem. This man went around me and was like screaming, you know, obscenities, and the veins in his neck were bulging and he was all red. And I just looked at him and I was like, wow, people people really are like this. And I didn't realize that I was so removed from it because like I'm a New Yorker, tried and true, and nothing like New York, but like being away from it and finding peace and being abroad and experiencing other cultures and being with other people just really provided me this peace that stayed with me, which then made me see him in a different light. And I'm like, this is not okay. This is not okay. And I definitely feel like America does that to us. We're constantly trying to do the next thing, be bigger, have more, buy more, make more money, whatever it may be. Like I remember telling people my salary in Bahrain and they were like, oh girl, that's nothing. And I'm like, yeah, but it's tax free. And I also don't pay rent because they give me an apartment, and I also don't have to have a car, and I don't need a car note, and I don't need car insurance. Like I rattled all of the bills that I was not going to be paying in the United States because of that. And it was like, oh, then the light bulb goes off of like, oh, it's a different type of living, or even living abroad and being able to go to the doctor and being able to afford it even without insurance. Even though I had insurance, like I remember getting sick and going to the doctor. They had the pharmacy at the hospital. I had an upper respiratory infection. They gave me, some stuff. I spent in total, I think like 26 BD. 26 BD is about the equivalent. Let's round it off to 30, multiply it by 2.5. Let's put that at 3. It's less than $90. Like it was like 70 something bucks. With insurance, because I just recently had surgery, with insurance, my surgery cost $44,000. I still owe $3,000. I had to pay the doctor up front $2,500. I also have a bill for the anesthesiologist, which is $4,000, and you're expecting me to pay it out of pocket, even though I have insurance. You can't tell me that's better. You cannot. There is no way you can convince me that's better. And I feel that it's important for us to know what's available to us because we don't have to live that way. If we choose to, that's fine. Because for some people, this works. But for other people that are trying to find a way outside of this maze that we've been dropped into, go international. Go international. Try another country. Try another country.
Dr. Pierre's dissertation focus and life's work as an educator is focused on education, equity, and inclusion. Those are big words. Is equity and equality one and the same, or no?
No. So I would actually speak to it from a historical standpoint, right? So African Americans in the United States fought for equality, and they got it, but they didn't get equity. When you are starting the race from way behind, equality doesn't help you because I'm still expecting you to finish the race the same way. I have not given you the tools that you need. I think about children in the classroom that either need something as simple as being dyslexic, right? And being given the opportunities to type up your paper instead of writing your paper. Or during testing, because of the fact that you might be ADD or ADHD, that you need a quiet environment because being around other students takes you off track. And the reason why you're not doing well on these exams is because someone didn't notice that during exams, you either have anxiety or you're, fidgeting. That's what equity is. Equity is providing people with the tools that they need to make the grade, to meet the mark. Equality is great. It really is. But equality makes the assumption that we're all starting from the same space. And we are not. We are not. Whether it be, coming from a family where education is not valued and being able to provide you support so that you're valued at school because you're not getting the help at home, to fighting for a student, in the ESC spectrum Gifted kids, often need mental health help. They may be gifted in terms of, and mind you, people often think giftedness is like you're gifted in everything. You're often gifted in just one area. But like, so many gifted students are actually underachievers because they're struggling with mental health. And it's like, oh, okay, I don't need to provide you with academic support, but here's the mental health that you need. Or occupational therapy, physical therapy. Like, there's so many things that are needed to make sure that you can be at the same line as everybody else to be able to continue on whatever your academic journey is. That we miss the mark so much, and kids just kind of fall through the cracks. You're wondering, why is this kid not showing up to school? And you didn't realize, hey, he suffers from anxiety and depression, and coming to school is difficult for him. So we need to make sure we have a school psychologist available so that when he is struggling, he can go to the psychologist, have a conversation, and still expect him to go back to class and do his work. We cannot expect that one size fits all is going to work and say that, hey, we're treating everybody equally, therefore everybody should, be able to be successful. What we should consider is, how can we provide as many tools within the system as possible so that it is an equitable system, so that everyone gets what they need so that they can be successful. One size does not fit all. Because if one size, did fit all, then we would not have the needs that we have in education now. We wouldn't be trying to revamp the system if the system was working the way it was supposed to.
Dr. Pierre is also a consultant and is also a curriculum writer. Dr. Pierre, please tell people ways they can stay in touch with you and follow your journey. It looks like your journey may, after the Cayman Islands, the lovely Cayman Islands, may lead you back to the US or possibly somewhere else, who knows? But anyone who's interested in following your journey, where should they tap in?
Well, I definitely have my website, Differentiated Ed Consulting. I'm on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn. Very easy to find me. I often become what I needed, right? So during grad school, one of the biggest issues that often students face is mental health issues. There's actually a pretty decent, not a very high rate, but a pretty decent, I think just one life loss is enough, but there's a pretty decent rate in terms of those that either struggle with mental health or even commit suicide during that journey, because it really often makes you question everything you thought you knew. So while my consultancy offers academic support, I really am there to support the entire journey, because I know how difficult that journey can be. And it is especially difficult for minorities, right? So women, people of color, people who might have learning differences, right? Because I still keep in contact with one of my students who just finished and he's on his way to grad school, and he's like, I'm going to be reaching out to you to consult. And I'm like, I'm here for it, because he was one of my students that was dyslexic. And navigating education has been very difficult for him. So I feel like it's important to be that space for people who want to advance in their particular field, but might be experiencing some sort of difficulty along the way. I edit papers. I have feedback sessions. I talk them through preparing for, the actual dissertation presentation. So it really is kind of like an all-around service, but I also provide curriculum writing for schools. I see myself very much as like a change agent. So when I think about my leadership, I'm a transformational leader. So I look at schools and what do you need to do? Are there systems changes that need to be made? Codifying some things that might need to be done. So yeah, if it's about education, I'm here for it. So I'm open to, people reaching out, whether it be just to, have discussions about next steps in their career or next steps in their academic journey, or even, schools in terms of next steps and changes that they want to implement.
Powerful. And I'll put your information in the podcast notes as well. Dr. Pierre, thank you so much. You've given us so much to process. Definitely inspired, and your transparency really goes a long way. Thank you so much for sharing about your journey with listeners and viewers. I'm proud of you, proud of all you've accomplished, and I look forward to further discussions. I know there's an upcoming book. You haven't stated it outright, but I'd be happy to have you back to discuss further your journey. Thank you so much again for being a guest on the Waterwork Podcast.